Conor McGregor, at 24 years old, was one of the most beautiful strikers this sport has ever produced. Not good. Not promising. Beautiful. The kind of fighter who makes analysts reach for language that belongs in an art review rather than a competitive breakdown, because what he was doing inside that cage against Max Holloway in 2013 was technically so complete, so precise, so effortlessly dominant across every single dimension of MMA simultaneously that calling it a performance feels inadequate. He did not just win that fight. He gave a clinic in striking, then a clinic in wrestling, then a clinic in jiu-jitsu, all in the same 3 rounds against an opponent who was not a beginner. And then, somehow, he became the most commercially successful fighter in the history of combat sports, and also one of the most tragic cases of wasted potential the sport has ever produced. That contradiction is the entire story of Conor McGregor in a single sentence. And it has never been more relevant than it is right now, with McGregor days away from his return against Max Holloway, almost 13 years after that first meeting. Start with what actually happened in that 2013 fight, because the specifics matter enormously for understanding what the rematch actually represents as a competitive event. The age argument that people always reach for when discussing this matchup, that Holloway was only 21, that it was unfair to use that performance as evidence of anything, is simply not as strong as it sounds once you actually examine the numbers. Yes, Holloway was 21. But McGregor was 24. The gap between them was 3 years in age, not 15. McGregor was himself a young fighter in that fight, not a seasoned veteran operating against an inexperienced kid. The difference in the fight was not experience in the biographical sense. It was talent, preparation, and a level of technical sophistication in McGregor's game that simply had no peer at that weight class at that moment. The striking in the first round was operating at a level that is genuinely difficult to describe without reaching for extreme language. McGregor was controlling the distance with a precision that made Holloway's counters feel almost hypothetical. When Holloway did land something, McGregor's reaction communicated a kind of casual dismissal, as if he was acknowledging the attempt while making clear it registered as essentially irrelevant. He was controlling the range, the timing, the volume simultaneously. He could throw a front kick to maintain distance at exactly the moment Holloway tried to close it. He could throw an oblique kick. He could do essentially anything he wanted because his distance management was so far ahead of Holloway's ability to solve it that the fight was happening on terms Holloway had no mechanism to change. The jab and uppercut combination that defined his striking output in that first round was the specific expression of a technical framework that, in that moment and at that weight class, was legitimately world-class. The mixing of those 2 shots, at the correct range and with the correct timing, was creating problems that a 21-year-old Holloway simply did not have the tools to solve. And the reaction when Holloway occasionally connected, that dismissive almost smirk, the body language communicating that nothing landing was registering as a genuine threat, was not performed confidence. It was the natural expression of a fighter who understood he was operating significantly above the competitive level of his opponent and felt no uncertainty about that assessment in real time. The second round added dimensions that the first round had not required. McGregor was already winning so completely on the feet that he could afford to demonstrate control in completely separate areas of the fight. He took Holloway down. He dominated on the ground. And the specific position he reached on the ground, the knee on belly position, is worth spending a moment on because of what it communicates about the gap in the fight at that point. Knee on belly is not a finishing position. A fighter with even basic jiu-jitsu knowledge, even a blue belt, understands how to escape it with appropriate timing and technique. The fact that McGregor was landing it against an MMA fighter in a UFC fight, in the second round of a competitive 3-round contest, is a signal about how completely he had demoralized his opponent by that stage of the fight. Holloway was not responding with the composure that allows a jiu-jitsu knowledgeable fighter to escape that position because the cumulative weight of the first round had already altered his ability to think clearly under pressure. The second round numbers are the most revealing statistic in this entire breakdown. McGregor was landing approximately 3 times the significant strikes Holloway was landing during that period. 3 times. In a competitive fight between 2 professional MMA athletes fighting in the UFC. Not dominating by a wide margin, 3 times the output. That differential reflects something beyond simply having better technique or better timing. It reflects complete, total, comprehensive control of every single variable that determines whether strikes land in the first place. The third round showed something important as well, which is that McGregor's cardio was always going to be the variable most likely to introduce uncertainty into any fight that extended to the championship rounds. He was visibly more tired in round 3 than he had been in rounds 1 and 2, and this matters specifically because of the rematch and because of what Holloway has become since that night. Even in a fight he was winning completely, McGregor's gas tank was operating at a different level than his technical toolkit. He still controlled the third round. He still took Holloway down, passed guard within the first minute, got put back up, then took him down again, all while Holloway managed to land a head kick that any other night against any other opponent at that exhaustion level might have been more consequential. But the cardio limitation was visible, and that visibility matters for any analysis of what happens in a 5-round rematch at welterweight in 2026. Now here is the brutal analytical question that the beauty of that 2013 performance makes both more and less easy to answer. How much of what Conor McGregor was in 2013 still exists inside the version that is about to fight Max Holloway again? Because if even a fraction of that 24-year-old skill set remains operational after 6 years away, the argument that he has no realistic path in this fight is considerably weaker than the simple competitive analysis makes it appear. But if that version is genuinely gone, if what remains is the outline of the skills without the timing and the reflexes and the distance management that made them dangerous, then the fight becomes exactly the kind of pace management challenge that Holloway specifically excels at, turning into a prolonged, systematic breakdown of an opponent who cannot sustain the defensive demands of being targeted continuously. The specific claim worth making clearly and without excessive hedging is this: the 2013 version of Conor McGregor was more talented as a pure martial artist than Max Holloway was at that moment and arguably at any subsequent moment in Holloway's career. That is a genuinely controversial statement because of what Holloway has accomplished since, but the technical evidence in the 2013 fight itself supports it. The assessment that McGregor, at his peak of commitment and discipline, had the potential to be among the greatest fighters this sport has ever produced is not romantic revisionism about a career that underperformed its potential. It is a direct reading of what he was doing in the cage at 24 years old when he was fully focused. The tragedy is that the word potential is doing enormous work in that sentence, and the word potential in combat sports has a specific and sometimes cruel relationship to the actual career outcomes it is attached to. McGregor, at 24 years old, with the discipline he was displaying and the technical sophistication he was operating with, had the raw material to build something genuinely extraordinary. What he built instead was something that is extraordinary in commercial terms and deeply disappointing in competitive ones: one win of any real consequence in the last decade, a leg held together by hardware, 6 years of decisions that prioritized every other dimension of his life over the specific, brutal, unglamorous daily work that elite fighting actually requires to maintain. The Dana White anecdote from when they first met is worth repeating in this context because it captures the specific combination that made McGregor such an unusual figure in the sport's history. White said he walked out of that meeting uncertain whether McGregor could actually fight at all, but knowing that if he could fight even a little, he was going to be the biggest name the sport had ever produced because of how he communicated. That combination, the specific gift for language and presence that White recognized immediately alongside the technical fighting ability that would eventually be demonstrated comprehensively, is what made McGregor genuinely unprecedented rather than simply successful. Nobody had ever packaged those two things together at that level before. The talking was not covering for a lack of fighting ability. The fighting ability was real and it was world-class. And the talking was also real and it was world-class. Together they created something the sport had never seen and may never see again. The honest current assessment is the one that carries the most analytical weight heading into the rematch. Max Holloway is more of a fighter right now than McGregor is. Not because McGregor's talent has completely evaporated. Talent at that level does not simply disappear. But because Holloway has continued doing the work every single day since that 2013 fight, and McGregor has not. The path Holloway has been on, fighting the best competition available, absorbing the lessons of losses and near misses, building an increasingly complete skill set over more than a decade of active elite competition, is exactly the path McGregor abandoned somewhere between the second Nate Diaz fight and the Khabib loss and the leg break and everything that followed. Both of them had talent. One of them kept investing in it. The other one built a whiskey company. That is the most honest framing of this matchup. McGregor left the path. Holloway never did. And in a sport where daily commitment to the process separates the career that achieves its potential from the career that falls short of it, that specific difference in the two men's last decade is the most important variable heading into July 11th. Not the age gap, which is minimal. Not the talent gap, which may still favor McGregor if we are being honest about raw gifts. The commitment gap. Because the most talented fighter in the world who has not been fighting is, in the cage, measured only by what that talent can actually still do. And after 6 years and a leg break and everything else, the only honest answer to that question is that nobody knows, including McGregor himself. Not until the cage door closes.